Thank you all for joining us. This is a presidential panel this afternoon talking about a variety of issues around race, and it's going to be moderated by Alma Clayton Peterson, who I'm going to introduce and then turn the floor over to her. Dr. Clayton Peterson has been a long time, last couple of years, colleague of the President's Commission on Human Relations and Equity. She comes with a long line of academic credentials and expertise in the area of diversity and race relations and inclusiveness. She's authored several publications, one of which we've been using as the template for our own plan, calling Making a Real Difference with Diversity, a guide for institutional change. Alma is a true friend of the university and a true friend of the PCHRE, and I'm delighted that she has agreed to moderate today's forum for us. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Alma Clayton Peterson.
No need to clap. I'm one of you. I want to bring your attention to a couple things before we get started, and take a minute or so to do that. I want you to find on your seat something that looks like this. It's an evaluation form. No one knows how well you do unless you give us feedback about how we're doing. But I want to bring your attention to it before we start so that you could be thinking about the questions as you engage in this dialogue with our panel. If you have the questions in mind, it's much more likely that you will respond. Our response rate goes up, and we get a better idea about what we need to do the next time to make this more engaging for you. I had told the panelists that I'd give them a minute to introduce themselves. They've already been introduced, so I'm going to dispense with that notion and say that we're here with a set of goals. And those goals are, one, to raise awareness and knowledge of the campus community about the effects of stereotypes. Remember, the name of this session is Everything's Fine at Fresno State, Myths and Misconceptions about Campus Diversity. So number one, raise awareness. But also to provide opportunities for different points of view about the importance or lack of importance of campus diversity to be made public so as to separate opinions from fact. And then thirdly, to provide opportunities for you, the community, to offer viable additions or alternatives to our current plan of action, and that is the ASPIRE plan. It is in the back. There are handouts. Please take them. Those collateral materials really do a great job of explaining where we're trying to go. So with that said, we have a series of questions that we're going to pose that they have been made aware of already. So they'll fill your head with knowledge and awareness about why this is an important topic. So, why do we need a campus strategic plan for inclusion, respect, and equity? That's our ASPIRE plan. So we'll start with President Castro, please.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
It's nice to see all of you here. And I want to thank all of you for coming today, and want to thank the President's Commission on Human Relations and Diversity for sponsoring today's event, and my panelists, I want to thank them for joining me. This is a very important day for me here with all of you because I believe this is one of the most important issues that a university should grapple with. And I think that way because of the rich history that Fresno State has and the important role that public universities play in our society. And if there is any kind of institution that can be a model for how to think about and talk about and how to act upon our values that reflect the broad diversity of our community and the valley and the nation and the world, it would be a place like Fresno State. And we were established in 1911, so we've been around over 100 years. And I think this is a great time to discuss these important issues. And so to get to the question itself, I had a chance to reread the strategic plan today. And I've read it a number of times since I've been here. I think it's a great thing that we have it. I think it's aspirational in all the right ways, and I think it's important that we have here at Fresno State that we strive for a safe, inclusive, and a culture that's broadly reflective of so much diversity here in the Valley. I think it's imperative that that we work every day to aspire to those higher levels. And this is a plan that was developed prior to my arrival. And while I support it, I also am open to the conversations that we're going to have today and in the weeks and months ahead that might enable us to strengthen our work together even more. I think it's important that we have documents like this at universities like Fresno State, because we can showcase for other institutions, newer institutions, other kinds of institutions, a way to do this, and we can learn from what these other institutions are doing as well. And so I like the learning part of this, and I hope that as we reflect together that we'll introduce the different perspectives that we have from our various experiences. When I think about this work, I think about it as a former student, as an alumnus of several universities, as a faculty member, staff member. For a while during my career, I was an equal opportunity officer, so I still remember a lot of those very important functions that universities play in that area. And on our way over, some of the faculty were talking about how they can get involved in those kinds of important activities. So, so in short, I want us to strive for a culture where everybody thrives at Fresno State, where everybody's values are considered and embraced, and that we have programs, that we have initiatives, that we take actions in ways that really model that kind of behavior. And I think having a document like this is one very important part of that process.
Thank you, President Castro. I'd like to remind you that you can interact with the panel via Twitter. Let me see, how many people are Twitters? Excellent. So can you read this on the board? Yes? Okay, those of you who are tweeting, please send us your questions or comments anytime during the panel. These will be collected, and this provides us feedback. So, Rusty, same question.
Thank you. First of all, I am really delighted to be here. You know, I have been to many events like this, and I'm not sure that I have ever seen a room full of faculty and staff the way that you all are represented. And I think any strategic plan is only as good as the people behind it. I think that's really important to say from the very beginning. And I just want to share this personal note. I shared it at lunch. You know, I feel like I've come home. I was born just 50 miles, north of here in Merced, California, so I really thank President Castro for this opportunity to bring me home one more time. My grandmother is resting there, and so it gives me an opportunity to really reflect. So I'm kind of emotional about it. You know, when I think about diversity strategic plans, I've been doing this work, I like to say since the day I was born, and more professionally as a diversity officer in my career of over 30 years. But I think what a diversity plan does, and a strategic plan actually does, it brings diversity in from the margins of the institution. All too often, this work is seen as an add-on, and what this does, it really positions it in a way that holds the institution accountable, and also gives you a future in terms of what you might want to do, whether it's a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, et cetera. It helps keep the institution on target, because one of my concerns has always been that it has only been seen as an add-on and not as an important part of the institutional fabric of the entire campus, be it policies, be it whatever division, the budget, et cetera. And that's what I think a strategic plan does, because one of the things that I think we have suffered from is we haven't been able to develop strong measures of accountability, and I think a diversity plan does that. The other thing I think a diversity plan is important to do, and I'll stop there because I'll go on all day and give you my talk later on, and I don't want to do that. But the other thing that I think that's really important that we sometimes forget is that diversity was introduced to higher education as a political construct, not as an educational value. And I think what we have to do is we need to change the conversation, and we need to start looking at diversity as part of any strategic plan as an educational goal of the institution and place it within an academic context. And we have to revisit that. Because if you want your students to succeed in Fresno, you want them to be able to be successful in a global world. And so what is the responsibility of the institution to do that in every academic discipline in all of our student support services? So that is something that I think needs to start playing out in strategic plans. How is this an educational goal and not just a political right? Thank you.
And I think if you haven't had an opportunity to review the plan, you will see that the plan does just that. Not only does it address the educational imperative, it is inextricably linked to the university's strategic plan. So it's not one plan here and one plan here. They are melded together in a way that we grow together. So I'm going to address these next questions to Gwen Burks, Jody Harana, Jutu? Am I saying it wrong? Say your name. Jody. Touche, Jody. Hironaka Juto. Love it. And to Malik Simba. These questions go to you. Some people on campus in the campus community think that everything is just fine, while others find the environment very trying. What do you believe triggers these racial tensions? Let's start with you, Gwen.
Well, as an African-American Christian woman that works here on campus, and I am staff here on Unit 9 here, I believe these racial tensions come from people not going outside of their comfort zone or burying their heads in the sand and not acknowledging that things aren't fine on campus. You know, how can things be fine when there's people like us or me, and I can speak from my experience where I feel sometimes I'm invisible, where people walk by and they don't acknowledge me, or that I get pigeonholed into my position because I've been there for so long that they can't see me outside of that role. And you know, I've been on campus 20 years, have my bachelor's degree and my master's degree, and I graduated with distinction, but I've hit that glass ceiling. But it's, you know, I don't know, it's hard to kind of move up on campus, and I know that's been some of the concerns when the president asked for feedback from the community about people moving up. And I don't know if it's a racial thing, but I think from my perspective, being a black woman, you know, what else do I have to go on? And, you know, and also being viewed negatively simply because of the color of my skin or because of my religion. You know, I've been put down because I'm too religious. And that, to me, it can be an issue. And I just think sometimes we feel undervalued here on campus, especially the staff, where I feel like we don't feel like we play an important role here on this campus. And I know that we do, and I know that we've lost, we just had several staff members that just retired with over 30 years of service, and they really served the student community, but there was no recognition of that.
Mm. Thank you, Gwen. Jody?
Well, good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to be part of such a distinguished panel and to kind of experience diversity in various forms. You know, the Aspire plan, having an opportunity as part of my ACE fellowship to participate and work with Vice President Mattson on the implementation of that, and reflecting earlier on to work through the recommendation of the PCHRE years ago in establishing the National Coalition Building Institute team that's been responsible for engaging the campus in welcoming diversity workshops since 2000 and, I'm looking at Francine, 2001. And I look at the question and think in terms of just lack of awareness, the assumptions that we carry with us. We don't know what we don't know, right? I don't wake up in the morning thinking, well, you know, let me list all the things that I don't know and find those out. And yet, as a result of journeying the day, I learn more about what I don't know and what I need to ask by way of questions, the conversations I need to have with colleagues. And I guess the strength and the struggle with that is that as a result of just the sheer diversity of campus and the range of perspectives, we're really in a rich environment to have those conversations, and at the same time, creating those spaces and those places where folks feel safe to have those, the relationships that we have, allies to have those conversations, to test those assumptions in a safe way that we're not going to be evaluated on in a performance perspective, or that it might be held against us in the RTP process. I think sometimes, and I can speak from a personal perspective, the you know, maybe the expectation that I have of myself that I should, you know more and do more on behalf of diversity and inclusion, and at the same time knowing that it's an ongoing journey. You know, I think I too, you know, when Rusty says, you know, I've done diversity all my life. I had a colleague once who asked me via email, was working on a publication, you know, how often do you do diversity? And I kind of had to laugh and well, you know, there's things that I do. I don't know if I do diversity, but it's an ongoing part of who I am, and perhaps an aspect of all, you know, of who we are as individuals, but also a community of learners, of a community of folks who journey that on a day-to-day basis. So an environment where we kind of test those assumptions, that we welcome those. There's a phrase that we use in NCBI training, you throw your arms out, and I love to take risks, and I love to make mistakes, and I welcome you and I to take risks and make mistakes and learn more about myself and others in a group. And I think part of that journey includes not only learning about others, but that first layer is really learning more, you know, about oneself. And I think that, you know, the university is such a wonderful place to do that, not only as employees, as students, but also folks who kind of take that journey together. I think back, I'm alumna of Fresno State, and had to write a speech in a communications class on an issue of importance. And the issue that I thought was going to be maybe an easy issue to tackle, right? Students, we kind of look at maybe easier issues to tackle, was the significance of including in textbooks the internment of the Japanese American during World War II. And at that time, although that might kind of date me a little bit, it was an important issue, and it didn't appear in textbooks. And in that process of preparing for that speech, learning more about folks in my group, you know, being fourth generation Japanese American, my parents grew up in Hawaii, so they weren't really part of that internment. My perspective was very different, yet my colleagues or my classmates would look to me for the answers, and I really didn't have them. And in part, it was, well, I want to learn more, but perhaps maybe a little bit of that guilt. And often I think that it's that guilt that we have about maybe wanting to do more, or that we should know more, that kind of keeps that prejudice or that lack of expanded understanding kind of in place. So being able to be in a place like like Fresno State, to have those conversations, I think, are so important.
Thank you, Jody. Malik?
Trying to stay within the talking points here, I would say that the issue of tensions and conflict, those two things are addressed every day in classrooms within Africana Studies, Chicano Studies, and Women's Studies. These three programs are proactive in alleviating tensions and preempting conflict. With the only 3 programs that are proactive every moment, and we outreach with thousands of students in this respect. And we have programs every semester to alleviate tension and preempt conflict. Let me share this with you. We had a program, the Martin Luther King Garner Murdaugh Committee had a program in which we brought in a speaker, Harry Flournoy, who participated in a very famous basketball game in 1966 between University of Kentucky, an all-white team, and University of Texas, El Paso, that started a rarity, which was the 5 black players on the starting 5. So for those who are a little bit older, you remember that game in 1966. So Harry Flournoy participated in that game, and he came in to share his thoughts about the game of change that led to the desegregation of college sports. And I think, and this is, one of the things he said struck one of my students. And again, I want to reemphasize, those 3 programs, Women's Studies, Africana Studies, Chicano Latino Studies, are the only 3 programs that are constantly proactive in alleviating tension and preempting conflict. This is how we do it. So Mr. Flournoy gave this lecture after the movie Glory Road, and if you've not seen the movie Glory Road, it's just as good as Remember the Titans. In the previous year, we brought in Coach Boone, the real coach within the movie Remember the Titans. And he tried to get Denzel Washington to come in because they became close friends by producing the movie, but he could not bring Denzel in. But Coach Boone also gave an inspirational lecture centered around alleviating tensions and preempting conflict. This is one of my students' response papers. What struck me deepest about Mr. Flournoy's lecture is his statement, and he puts in quotation marks, the less you understand, the more you fear. The less you understand, the more you fear. Africana Studies, Women's Studies, Chicano Latino Studies, we drive home that point. We know the institution is desegregated. Very few institutions are integrated. Separate tables, and you know the concept of separate tables, you see it everywhere within the institutions, except within those 3 programs that bring students of diverse origins and ethnicities and faiths into our classrooms. But not only are they in our classrooms, the focus of the class and the curriculum is to inform and educate so that fear would decrease, fear would be alleviated, fear would hopefully be evaporated. He goes on to say, as a white male who has recently studied race and ethnicity in my undergraduate studies, I can attest to the truth of that statement. The less you understand, the more you fear. I have been forced, and that's a very interesting phrase, I have been forced. And sometimes when you force people, as you know, the human reaction is to resist. And that's a dilemma within the 3 programs. I think that's a dilemma within the administration in supporting diversity outside of those programs within traditional departments. Faculty tend to be resistant to forcing academic departments to hire in a diverse manner, as the students stated. He concludes by saying that through my classes have been limited, I found myself becoming much more comfortable with people from different and sometimes radical backgrounds. Comfortable level. Alleviating tension, preempting conflict. Thank you.
Thank you, Malik. I want to make a comment here because it ties us back to something that was said earlier today. Malik talked about 3 programs that really work at helping students become ready for either graduate school or the workforce and working in teams of diverse people. But where else in the curriculum do we help students learn that? And those of you who are faculty know that if there's an issue in a class, that if we're not comfortable talking about it, it doesn't get discussed. So we have to ready ourselves as educators to be ready for that conversation so that students then learn from us. How do we have that difficult dialogue with people who are different from ourselves? It starts with us, not the students. But I heard the students today say it starts with them. But it should be the institution's responsibility to teach them. We wouldn't send an engineer out into the community without having them be facile in calculus. So why do we say that diversity is less important when in those engineering teams they will be working with people from all over the world, including people who are from different races and ethnicities from this country? It's our responsibility to do so. So with that said, the question is, what can be done on campus to address the misconceptions and myths about race? These questions go to everyone, and let's start in the middle with you, Gwen, and then go back to to Rusty, back to Jody.
Okay, first of all, I think what the campus can do, I think the campus needs to hear the stories. They need to hear the stories of the good and the bad of what people are experiencing here on campus, and they need to feel safe to be able to share those stories. I believe that there also has to be a safe place where we can tell those stories so that other people that have experienced racial discrimination or have experienced misconceptions about who they are or who their race of people are, there needs to be a safe place for them to be able to go and to talk and to, because I don't know if there's any place on campus where we can go so that people can learn more about the different nationalities that are here on campus. That's something that I think would help on campus. So.
Jody. Now let me let Jody. Let's Jody.
And make sure I follow directions.
Okay, beat me up. That's okay. I can take it.
No, I was just kind of owning my Japanese heritage, where we have to kind of be rule followers and make sure that we're doing things correctly. And you know, I say that a little bit in jest, but I think, and two, having those places where we can have those dialogues and that the relationships are such that we can kind of call each other, or at least check in with each other as to some of those assumptions. You know, to look, for example, at the makeup of committees, so that there's diverse representation, whether it be, you know, staff representation, different bargaining units, different gender, ethnicity, you know, the whole range of diversity. And prior to that, being able to have engaged already in those conversations where I become more aware of those places that maybe my first thoughts about a particular group, I've already kind of worked through that a little bit. I know where those exist, so that when I am in a group and we're working on a task together, I can remain focused on the broader task and not necessarily that internal piece that I would have had to kind of work on before. I think also recognizing the importance of those places for those conversations for our students. I think sometimes we may make assumptions about who students are, who they are not, based on, you know, what box, you know, we kind of, our system kind of forces them to check. You know, I have a daughter who turns 21 next month. And it was quite interesting. She had an opportunity to sit in a panel in one of Kathy Reed's classes. And my husband is French-Canadian. And one of the questions that was asked, I don't remember exactly the details, I do remember the answer was, the question that was posed to my daughter was, which cultural group does she most identify with? Okay. And my assumption, as her mother, as a Japanese American woman, was naturally what? She was going to say what? That she identified more with her Japanese culture. And she didn't. You know, she took great pride in her French-Canadian culture. And I'm thinking, sitting in, God, that's like 3,000 miles away. What is she thinking about? And yet, in kind of processing some other pieces, understanding that she too is going through this process of learning more about her identity, and maybe over time having to choose one or the other. And if you look at her, she's quite beautiful, and yet sometimes folks don't know, you know, what her identity is. And people may say, so what are you? You know, the question that some of us may have heard in the past, which kind of raises that, well, yeah, what am I? And just, I guess, recognizing that just as each of us are on that journey and understanding how we can create those safe places for conversation, our students are there as well, and the assumptions that we may make about them, just as I have about my daughter and how she identifies, I think, you know, it's an ongoing journey, and I recognize that for myself, and I think recognizing that for ourselves and for our students is really important.
Thanks, Jody. Rusty?
Thank you. You know, as I was sitting here, it took me back to the University of Iowa, and we received a grant. I believe conversations like the one we're having is really critical to looking at myths and misconceptions. So we got a grant to have a faculty dialogue around difference. And it was scheduled for one semester, we thought. And we picked a handful of faculty, and there was this couple, every campus has them, on the faculty, who was against a diversity requirement from the STEM field. And I thought, oh no, this conversation's gonna go completely downhill. There's no way where it's gonna be very difficult. Well, in fact, these conversations started at 5 o'clock and were supposed to go till 7 o'clock. They would go till 11 o'clock at night. They met throughout the year. And what's important about this, and they even studied Gloria Anzaldúa because they asked me to come in and talk about her work. And they sat there, the couple, with their hands crossed the entire time. I was at every one of them. But at the end of the year, when we asked them to check out in terms of what did they think about the experience, to their credit, he responded on their behalf, of course. He said, we don't always agree. We didn't always agree with everything that was said in this dialogue, but we now have a better understanding of why you all believe that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that was important. This isn't just about getting people to agree, but it's about understanding where we locate ourselves in this conversation. And one of the other things I think we should do, you don't always have to talk about diversity to say why it's important or to address these myths, but you know, I haven't looked on your website. I don't know how students who represent difference are portrayed here. Is a scholarship, if a student is gonna go to the National Association for Chicano and Chicana Studies to present a paper, is that not newsworthy? To refute the notion that somehow we're not academically prepared. How are we promoting all of our students, not just for Marshall scholarships, but for the other kinds of things that are diversity related, not only in terms of students, but in terms of our faculty and our staff, and the kinds of things that they are doing. Because I think that then begins to undermine sort of misconceptions and the myths that we're not prepared, that we're not contributing, et cetera. We had a conversation at lunch today. There's a number of informal organizations on this campus that aren't actually funded, but they're playing an important role in the history of this institution as well as breaking ground. I think that should be embraced by your campus in terms of your website. I haven't looked at the website, to be really honest, and maybe it's there. But I think there's some promotional things that I think we underestimate that I think could really help address issues of myths and misconceptions. And again, there's a lot more, but those are 2 points I just wanted to make.
Thank you. Molly?
Interesting question. I think that Dr. Oputa, I saw her here earlier, I think she does an excellent job with her programming at the Women's Center in outreaching to provide safe environments for students to address diversity. So I'd like to thank Dr. Putu for her efforts at that. And, you know, and what she does, I think, is really on point, and I'm hoping that her program will become even more successful and the participation rates will increase over time. I'd like to address another point about this issue of diversity. And my first point, of course, that we address diversity referring to student outreach and so forth. But, and I know that the administration run diversity workshops for administrators. But what's important is that the resistance to change out of fear, out of isolation, is not only the concern that I have with students, but I also have it with faculty and administration. I remember one incident about 5 years ago. Every year, the history department take the lead to celebrate Constitution Day. Because I'm a legal historian, I do a critique as well as a celebration of Constitution Day, okay? And so we had a standing room only audience of students and some faculty and a few administrators. And what I shared with the audience that day was a racial restrictive covenant in Fig Garden Estates around 1955. And I gave them a copy of the racial restricted covenant, and then I talked about the U.S. Supreme Court case in 1956 that made them illegal to be enforced. You can still sign a covenant, but you can't look to the law to enforce that covenant. And so around constitutional issues of right of property and ownership, one very well-placed administrator wrote me a little nasty note saying that the Constitution Day is not to criticize the Constitution, it's to celebrate it. And so what's interesting, as a sidebar, the covenant restricted a wide variety of people from living in Fig Garden Estates, including Armenians. And I wrote a subsequent op-ed piece in the Fresno Bee talking about racial restricted covenants in Fresno and the restrictions upon Armenians. As I went back to my athletic club and interacted with many of the very well-off, rich Armenian farmers, the older gentlemen really embraced the article in the Fresno Bee because they say the younger generation don't know the struggles they had to establish themselves as equals to quote-unquote whites. And the younger generation, Armenian men, not one of them said anything about the article, even though they knew about it. And the older Armenian man says, that's your service. Your service as an educator is to teach the young who did not live the experience that we did. And I would dare say that's the same thing with administrators. Okay. And so I think that to be proactive about diversity and so forth, it's complex, it's intergenerational. Thank you.
Thank you. President Castro?
This has been very thoughtful comments. I guess where I would start is with my mother. My mother gave me the gift of embracing different cultures, and I learned that at a very young age, and she was definitely ahead of her time. This was before diversity was a term that was even used. But as I think about growing up and interacting with a wide variety of people that she knew, that helped me immensely as I went through different university settings, and as I think about what I'd like to see at Fresno State going forward is to build on the work that has been done before, to honor and respect the work that has been done here, and to take steps to open up our culture even more, to embrace a sense of curiosity. And I think about last week, Mary and I went to the Islamic Cultural Center, and how powerful that was to go and to learn about what happens there, or the Cambodian temple downtown. I've had a number of experiences like that over the last several months here in Fresno, and have seen the rich diversity that exists throughout the campus and the community. Because there have been many events here on campus. And I guess as president, what I'd like to see happen is more of that we take those opportunities to learn more. And through that learning, my hope is that we'll be able to strengthen our relationships and take the university to the next level. And our policies and practices, I believe, need to be as transparent as possible. Gwen made a great point about growth, and I think that we need to continue and enhance our investment in our own people and in their development, faculty and staff from all backgrounds. And I'd like us to become a model in that area, to really make a huge difference in that area. And I just appointed Gwen to a search committee, so Gwen, you're not invisible to me. I want you to know that. You're not invisible to me. And I think I have a special obligation to try to model that with other members of the cabinet, with leaders from the Senate, with our student body president, with the student leaders. I think we have a special responsibility. The deans, I see many of them here today, to really model that through our actions. And I think if we can do that together, we're going to make extraordinary progress. And we talk about being bold. I think being bold in this area would be to not run away from these difficult conversations, but to embrace them and to learn from them, and to become stronger together, and to become an even greater university where that is valued. And I'd love to do that with all of you in these coming years.
Thank you. So, our last question before we open it up to you, so get your questions ready. So I want somebody at the mic as soon as we're done, okay? This one goes to Jody, Gwen, and Malik. In your view, what can individual members of the campus do to further enhance race relations and Aspire, the strategic plan for diversity? Gwen, you want to start?
I think personally, for me, it's important that I don't think that my race is better than another race. I think it's important for me to get to know the different cultures that are out here on campus. Because, Fresno State, we're a vast campus, and we have vast and different cultures. And it's important that we support each other as we have events. Like race and the BFSA have the panel on privilege today. That was really good. And then going to support the students, to see what the students have to say. It's important that we as faculty and staff and administrators support the people that we're supposed to be here to serve, and that's the students. But also, I think it's important that the staff feel like they're supported. And I said I think we can attend different events. At my church on Sunday, we just had Super Sunday, and that's where the Fresno State comes out to the different African American churches. But we also had a presentation, because this is Black History Month. We also had a presentation from different cultures come into the church, and we had a presentation from the Sikh community. And it was very interesting to hear about their culture, because usually, and this is one of the things that our speaker talked about, is that usually when you see the turbans and the beards, you think that they're either Hindus or Muslims. But it was interesting to find out that there's more to Fresno and to the diversity and the cultures that are here. So I think it's just me going out and getting to know who my brothers and sisters are, because we are all brothers and sisters. And that was just something that I picked up.
Excellent.
Can I say one more thing? And I also, and I write down stuff and then I don't read it. And I also think that it's important that we don't assume or judge people based on maybe interactions that we've had with one person, because I think a lot of times that's what happens, is that we assume that because this one person is like this, then the whole race or the whole group is like that. And I think it's important that we expand our minds. And it's not, and I think a lot of times we deal with people out of fear, and I think Dr. Simba brought that up, that we allow fear to not let us go past our own boundaries. So I think that's important also.
Excellent. Jody?
I think also, in addition to this idea of fear, is sometimes we look at, or I look at, well, what was the person's intentions? Well, we didn't intend to leave a particular voice out, or we didn't intend to, or I know that person, they're a real, they're very nice, or don't worry about, he's pretty cool, and sometimes that's could be an excuse for not pushing further and not taking the time that is necessary in engaging in these more difficult dialogues, taking that time to assemble that committee that's diverse, taking the time to walk through some of those conversations that are a little bit more difficult, that may require us to give our colleagues a little space, or for our students to kind of to chew on that information a little bit more. I think is important. I think just being engaged with activity, but also looking at, so what voice, who's missing? What perspective are we missing? Because without that, our potential to come to the best possible solution may fall a little short, and how that diversity really enriches not only the discussions, but the decisions that we can make, and in terms of the decisions that we would hope our students would be able to make upon graduation, and be able to respond to the changing needs in the broader community and globally. I think we owe that to ourselves and to the community to be at our best in making those possible decisions, getting outside of that comfort zone. Just because the Asian faculty and staff hosts an event, you don't have to be Asian or even look Asian to show up. And we have lots of friends, and I would say that to be true about other organizations as well. So take advantage of just the range of opportunity on campus. I know there's the student Fresno State talks this evening and last week and next week as well. Taking advantage of all those opportunities.
Excellent. Thank you. And Malik, you have the last word here?
Yeah, on this issue, I think that the program that was established by Dr. Gonzalez in the College of Social Science was a faculty mentoring program. It was very successful, one-to-one with young students. And in that type of setting, we can really extricate from them their fear and their apprehension. I know that when Dr. Gonzalez established the mentoring program, we were pretty proactive in trying to get students to talk about what they are afraid of, their expectations and so forth. So maybe that can be modeled campus-wide, a mentoring program in which you kind of mismatch faculty with another student of another different culture. So that might work campus-wide. Let me just share this with you. To be proactive and to break that type of barrier, the apprehension, if I'm to academics, you gotta be really insightful. So I require students in practically every one of my classes to visit probably one of the better memorials I've ever seen on Japanese American internment, and it's right here in Fresno. It's at Illuvio and Palm, It's called a Palm Bluff Circle, just east of Palm on Alluvial. It's a brilliant pictorial history, all weathered, protected, that you walk in a large semicircle with a base of a Japanese garden where you can sit and view a visual image of Japanese internment. And in the distance, you can see where they were interned in Pandale. All my students are required to actually interact with that memorial and write a review. Okay, you break down the unknown and you become familiar and comfortable. And if by so you meet your daughter, you have something to talk about, a touchstone, okay? My last point about semantics, I try to share with students, and I give them pedagogically information to support this. There's the human race, then there are social historical groups. And I try to train them, and they're graded on this, not to use race as an identification. Sometimes it might not matter because social historical groups and the prejudices within those groups are just as strong as the concept of race. But we try, and as educators, we try to make students enlightened and progressive to help not only themselves but others. To eliminate what Mike Wallace, in his famous documentary around 1960, he produced it for CBS, The Hate That Hate Produced. The hate that hate produced. And so every single student within this nation, within this community, every single faculty and staff within this nation, this community, has to address the hate that hate produced.
Amen. Amen.
The prejudgment of African American students are no less or worse than the prejudgments of white students. That needs to be addressed. And it's a racial mountain. It's huge. But that's what we do in Africana Studies, Women's Studies, and Chicano Latino Studies. Did I miss one? Armenian Studies also. Okay.
I think this last comment gives me rise to say how really far Fresno State has come. And Cindy and the members of the PCHRE, would you mind standing so people know who you are? So when there's a comment, you know who to go to if there's feedback. Do you know who these people are? Come on, stand up. Give them a hand. They started 2 years ago with a semblance of a plan. They all worked extremely hard to pull this together. I'm just giving you time to think of your questions so you can get to the microphone now. Come on. And to say that frankly, I do work nationally, and I use Fresno State, I hate to say, as my poster child. I have never seen a campus move from a disarray of ideas to a coherent, comprehensive plan that they rolled out to the various constituent groups as spectacularly as they have done, and to continue to do this work in implementation and trying to assess it and to hold people accountable to the actions that are within it. I want to say thank you very much, and I hope you thank them for their work every day, not just today. Please.
So I speak with a little trepidation, given that I have the mask of white male privilege.
Can you say who you are and where
Sure.
what department you're?
I'm Philip Neufeld in Technology Services. So I speak with a little trepidation given the mask of white male privilege. But first of all, want to honor and just value the wonderful work of diversity and inclusion that Fresno State's about, and that Fresno is a place of. That's the beauty of it. And I've been to 34 countries. I love diversity. I had a chance to visit Egypt and go into a mosque and worship with, even though I come from a different background, with Muslims, with the Coptics. And Gwen actually went to the country where I grew up, which was Zaire. And I went to Pinedale Elementary, where I was one of the only Caucasians there at that time. And it actually had a Japanese internment camp. The pads were still there when I went to elementary school. The reason I mention that and I come to the mic is that I have this mask. And the challenge is that sometimes in conversations, we're treated as people and not persons, as Dr. Simbo said. And the interesting thing is I played on an all-African soccer team in central San Joaquin Valley, and I was experiencing, actually I was seeing in just, gosh, in the 90s still the discrimination that was happening from white and Hispanic refs towards the African Americans still in the 90s. And for me, it was another eye-opener. But the reason I come to the mic is that as we have the conversations about inclusion, those with power and privilege, and that landscape changes and will change. The Armenians didn't and now have power and probably now do in our valley. But we need to make sure we have sanctuary for those who come from power and privilege so they can somehow leave it safely at the door and be able to be persons and to tell their story.
Yeah.
Because and sometimes it feels like we come with a mask and we don't all have that mask. And even those who really truly are about that power and privilege, particularly in our culture and our institution, that there is truly a community where there's sanctuary so that we can actually really celebrate the richness of this diversity in the Valley and at Fresno State.
I think you raised an important point, and would anybody on the panel like to react? I think you're right about this space, but how do we do that? Talk to us. How do we do that? How do we create a space when we have a session like this afternoon, the choir shows up? And I think the choir needs to learn how to sing better. We need new music, but we need to also expand the choir and include others. But it takes you walking through the door and saying, I'm here to learn, in the same way that we walk in the door and say, I'm here to learn. How can we bring that about? Please, come to the mic, please. Just walk up to it.
I'm sorry, I might not answer your question, but my name is Christine Edmondson. I'm from the psychology department. And I have a couple questions, but before I ask them, I guess I do want to express my deep appreciation for the folks that I've been able to get to know and love here on campus. Over it's getting to be 18 years now. And they've supported me in going on the journey of understanding myself as a white person, understanding ethnic diversity and what that means, and the lived experiences that people have. And I really feel like I need to express this appreciation because I know in doing that, my dear friends and colleagues, had to be patient with me when I made mistakes. They had to be vulnerable with me in terms of telling stories. And so I just have to give a lot of appreciation for it. I see it as a gift. So I see some of them here. And I think some of you know who you are. And some have left, and I miss them terribly. But I thank them. My first question, and a little bit more.
Can I hold you to one
Yeah.
question? Because you've got two
Okay,
people behind
yeah.
you.
Oh, yeah. And I was gonna
So
be
pick the one
sensitive
that's
to
the
that.
highest priority to you.
Yeah, I'll be sensitive to that. But the first one, I think, one thing that allowed me access to these folks is my field. I'm a clinical psychologist, and clinical psychology is about personal growth and development. And so on that journey of learning about personal growth and development, certainly ethnic identity, I had great fortune along the way, starting in high school in Indiana, of all places. People actually allowed me to get exposed to some diversity issues. So when I got here, I was able to, grow. And so this personal growth and development and ethnicity was so much a part of what I saw as my professional development. And that brings me to my question and kind of my issue. I was able to do what I've done, and I still have a ways to go, because diversity was intersected my personal and professional development. Okay, as a counselor, I have to grow, right? And so my question for the panel then is, what are opportunities that we can create to encourage people on campus, particularly faculty and staff, to engage in, to find ways to intersect their personal and professional development? And I'm particularly challenged when I think about this myself in fields like STEM fields, engineering.
Can we allow the
biology,
panel
and
to
stuff.
answer the
Yes,
question?
and so I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Can we start with Rusty and then we'll go from there? Thank you. Thank you for your question.
I also want to address the privilege one.
Put your button up.
I also want to address the privilege one, if I may, because that's sort of rumbling around in my head, and I don't believe in having somebody sit down and there be absolute silence. That's what gets us in trouble. But let me go to that. I think one of a good way to bring people together, I'm a strong believer in this, it's worked throughout my career, is to have people read a common article or a book and they get to sit down and they talk about it, because they're all going to have a different perspective about it. I think it's a really safe thing to do. As long as there's some ground rules that people aren't going to be criticized for their point of view, et cetera. But again, it's about where everybody locates themselves. That's just one strategy. There's probably many, many more. In terms of the privilege question, if I may, if I understood the point, I was sitting here thinking, I also have privilege. I'm a Mexican, and most people don't believe me, but I am, and I'm indigenous, and most people don't believe me. And I could go through the world like that, sort of living on that privilege. But what I also know, I think is really interesting, if I heard the question correctly, is to create a space for privilege. Did I hear that correctly? And
Space for interaction.
a
He's
space
saying
for interaction that is safe. I've never known, me anyway, and other people have privilege who don't have that privilege to enter into any space. And sometimes that also closes down conversation. I think it's an important thing, though, that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
But because privileged people, when I go into a community, for example, who doesn't have the educational status that I do take I listen, because I go in there, not just to take over the conversation, although I might be doing that today, but I'm with all you privileged folks, so I'm standing my ground, so to speak. But, I think it's a really complicated kind of thing, because I always worried as a youngster, especially when I was a student activist, that non-folks or privileged folks would come in and take over. And that's the other part. And so I think it requires a dialogue. I think he had a lot of courage to bring that up, by the way. I think it was. And clearly we don't have a really strong answer. But I think we have to think about it, because clearly I can move in and out of this world and nobody would know who I was if I chose to do that. But I choose not to do that for all kinds of reasons. And it's how we use our privilege. What I don't want is privilege to be a missionary approach to how you work with people of color also.
Amen.
Those are those issues as well. So I'm going to think about this question some more, and I think it's an important question. But I'm not sure about how folks who are disenfranchised can create that space in an unprivileged kind of a way. And we have to understand the baggage that comes with it, the historical baggage, because there's a lot there. So I don't know if that was helpful or not. Maybe I just complicated it.
No, I think it was very helpful. And, well, let me not go there. I think we have... Okay, so here's my dilemma. And Rusty, this is to you too. We're supposed to be done right now, okay? I won't say anything about anything, except that I also have 4 questions that came through Twitter, and 3 people in line. So the question becomes, the next session starts at 2:45, so we have a few minutes. So I wondered if we could get the questions on the table so that you have something to chew on, seriously, And then we'll let the audience, let the panel take one of the questions, each person take one of the questions and respond to one of the 7 questions that are here. And that should take us till about 2:40. Is that okay? I'm checking with the group. Yep. Okay. So let me start with these, because they're right there, and then you can start, What about age discrimination? In a young culture, do we only value what's new and young? That's question 1. 2, our donors are mostly white. Will a move toward diversity increase more diverse donors? I have something to say about that. Question 3, sometimes when we talk about diversity, we forget to include white people. How do we make sure they are included? Conversation on Twitter, lots of comments on that one. So remember that. And number 4, should we place pressure on the term diversity? Place pressure on the term diversity. Okay, Janelle, thank you. Say who you are and what department.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. My name is Janelle Pitt, and I'm a faculty member in the School of Education. As my colleague Christine Edmondson mentioned, thank you all very much. Deep appreciation for what's happening here today. I fully acknowledge that this is a panel on campus diversity, and it's with intention that I asked this very specific question. I was told several years ago that being a single mom, being black, and working here at Fresno State wouldn't go over well for tenure. And it wasn't until April 2013 until I attended a Faculty Women of Color in the Academy National Conference at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and I had the opportunity to hear you talk, Dr. Barcelo, that I found that there were other ways of existing in academia. I heard women fully tenured at research-intensive institutions talk about their experiences of being a single mom and kind of rising through the ranks. So my question is, if anyone can speak to how women faculty of color and also women administrators of color can be more fully supported here at Fresno State. I acknowledge that I am not an administrator, but also given what has happened very recently with Chancellor Phyllis Wise at University of Illinois, Chicago, I'm just wondering in terms of more fully supporting a specific segment of the community here on campus.
Rusty, we're going to get all the questions on the table first, and then we're going to answer. Okay, thank you. Go.
I don't have a question. I'm Nora Chapman, a member of the Modern and Classical Languages Department here at Fresno State. Thank you for being here and holding this panel. I wanted to answer your question, Alma, about what we can do. I would personally like to see an Office of Diversity and Equity on this campus so that we have a safe, neutral, confidential place where people can go, have conversations with people who understand the issues, are experts in mediation, understand how to talk to people in a really respectful way. I would truly appreciate that. I have good news. I wanted to answer your question about do we toot our horn well enough. I just saw the statistics for all of Interfraternal Council, all the Greek groups on campus. The highest performing group on campus is a group of black women who belong to Alpha Kappa Alpha. Yes.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Alex Espinoza. I'm Associate Professor of English. I'm also the Interim Chair of Chicano and Latin American Studies. I want to say thank you to my wonderful colleague Malik Simba for addressing the important things that CLAS, Africana Studies, and Women's Studies do. I have a couple of questions, and one of those might ruffle a couple feathers, but I'm the youngest of 11, so I'm used to ruffling feathers. I'd like to know specifically what we could do as a university to protect those departments and programs that offer the services that CLAS, Africana Studies, and Women's Studies do. We've seen a lot recently what's going on nationally with a lot of ethnic studies programs.
And that is the dismantling of them.
Yeah.
Good. Go ahead. And the second question?
My other question is, how do we change attitudes on this campus? Because I've encountered a lot of people on this university who have told me flat out, everyth's fine. We don't have a problem here. Just move along. We've always been diverse. How do we change that attitude? Because you know what? We're diverse. We're not aware, though. We're not sensitive to the needs and the realities that faculty and staff and students of color face. So how do we change that attitude? And third,
No, you said two. No.
I said two. And third, I'm gonna ask the president, I'm gonna say this again, and I know I've said this to you in meetings before. We really need a chief diversity officer on this campus.
Okay. Okay, pick your question. Rusty first. Oh, Rusty, you're going to be here the next go-around. Yeah.
Well, since I work in advancement, I'll talk to about the diverse donors. I think that's important. I think that we do leave a lot of, we leave a lot of money on the table when we don't have development officers that go out and look. We need to look for the richness in the minorities. Mm-hmm. I think, but I think that needs to be reflected in the people that go out and talk too. Mm-hmm. We can't ask people to go talk to diverse constituencies when we don't have a diverse development staff. I think that's important, that we need to have people that understand about the cultures that are out there. We need people, because I think a lot of times people will respond better to people that look like them, so that they have that commonality together. So I think that's important. I think that was a great question about having the diverse donors. Thank you.
Excellent. I'll say more if we got time. Thank you. Okay, pick your question. Jody?
I don't remember the question, but I know how I'd like it to answer it.
Well, answer it and we'll figure out what question it is.
I think there was a question in regards to how do we change attitudes and this assumption that everything is actually okay. And I think looking at our data, looking at ways of gathering that in more accurate ways. I understand that there's a climate survey that will be initiated soon. I think there was one over time, and there were some gaps in that, and really looking at, so what's that next cut on assessing our community. I think we can make assumptions, just as I did with my daughter, without asking those questions. And I think a few folks don't represent the whole, and we certainly are very diverse, where there's so many of us. You think the sheer size of our community and how that might be different or similar, across staff, faculty, students, and administrators. But really looking at in a systematic way that information to inform those next steps, not assuming that if a few folks say it's okay and that we have a plan that looks lovely and that a lot of hard work into it, that we're good to go. But it's an ongoing journey, a snapshot in time as to where we are, but utilizing that information to better assess where we're at.
Malik, give me a minute. Yeah. Those of you in the back, please, there's a whole bunch of seats. Come around this way. Come sit down, please. Because we're going to run just a little bit long. Okay, go ahead.
Fresno State, we do not exist in isolation. We have the State Center College District, and they are feeders to our student body. And I'd like to see, and maybe you're doing this already, President Castro, but we need to work with the State College Community District, because they have a new campus, Willow International, and now they basically have what we call Chocolate City in the vanilla suburbs. Willow International is probably about 90% plus white. Fresno City College downtown is very diverse. We will be getting students coming out of the Clovis District, going to Willow International, have never really experienced serious diversity. And so the headache that creates, we will be receiving it. So we need to be proactive and working with the State College to deal with how they are addressing diversity at Willow International.
President Castro, would you like to say the last word on the response, whichever one you want to answer?
Sure. I think I just want to say a few words about how women faculty and administrators can be supported. And this is actually an area where I've done some research and was part of a Rutgers University Institute that focused on this area. I would be very interested in our President's Commission looking at this with me and with others, and coming up with some recommendations for how we can further strengthen our work in this important area. Thank you.
Would you, I would say to the question about diversity, please look at the plan. There is a definition of diversity there, and it includes white people. So that answers that question. How do we get engaged is for you to show up, people to come and to engage in the conversation and get uncomfortable, just in the same way we get uncomfortable when we're talking about it. So with regard to donors, I'd say at Vanderbilt in 1982, they started a Black Alumni Association. That's a very vibrant group. We celebrated our 25th anniversary 4 years ago. And they are a major source of donors. So you have to support the people who you want to donor. And it was us doing that, doing the outreach. It was African American administrators linking them with students, helping us recruit students, and helping us keep students. And that's why the retention rate right now is where it is. Thank you very much. And I think the age discrimination, I don't know if I can answer that one, because I am way too old for that. And with that said, let me ask you to thank our panelists so much for being with us. Thank you.